Welcome to Vertical City. I'm your host, Lennon Richardson. During each episode, I interview one of the world's top experts in architecture, urban design, engineering, or ecology so that we can better understand and develop solutions for sustainable living. Thank you for listening, and get ready to join us on another groundbreaking and uplifting episode. Gilbert Van Kerckhove is from Belgium and has lived and worked all over the world, including Brazil, Nigeria, Spain, Thailand, and Myanmar. An electrical engineer by trade, Gilbert first came to China in 1980 to oversee the development of a new power plant. He has now lived and worked in China for over 30 years and considers Beijing his home. In 2000, Gilbert founded Beijing Global Strategy Consulting, which provides strategic guidance to international and Chinese companies alike. He's worked on a large variety of projects, including power plants, iron and steel plants, urban metro lines, water treatment facilities, and telecommunication systems. He was also deeply involved in the preparation of the 2008 Beijing Olympics and actually worked as a Beijing city government employee for many years. Gilbert recently authored the book Toxic Capitalism, which comments on overconsumption and environmental destruction around the world. In this interview, we discuss several of the problems that China faces today, including construction, engineering, human rights, and environmental issues. Gilbert also outlines strategies for creating change and successfully completing large-scale projects in China, as well as several of the problems that are faced by local and foreign entities when attempting to do so. For complete show notes and important links, visit verticalcity.org/podcast. Gilbert, welcome to the Vertical City podcast.
Thank you, Lennon, for the invitation, and a good day for you wherever you are.
Thank you. I'm currently in Vietnam, and good day to you. You're currently in Beijing, is that correct?
Right, sitting nicely in my office.
Okay, excellent. I'm sitting in my hotel/office at the moment. So I want to just start by asking you how you got your start in China, because I know you've worked in China for over 30 years now.
Yes, it's kind of an adventure, a part of my adventurous life. It's a very long story. Interesting. It started, you wouldn't believe it, in Nigeria, when I was sitting in a small hotel in Port Harcourt, getting acquainted with a guy from Hong Kong. And then 1 year later, I found myself back in Beijing. And the reason was I was working in Nigeria. Circumstances were not very good. I felt attracted by Asia, and then a Belgian company was looking for somebody to open their office in Beijing because they had just gotten a very big contract to build a coal-fired power plant. That was in 1980. Wow. So they were looking for somebody, and the enthusiasm was very limited. So I was already kind of suspicious when I was received by the HR people in the company with the red carpet being rolled out for Gilbert Van Kerckhove coming to submit for an interview for China. And I said, why are they so friendly to me? Because apparently nobody wanted to come to China in 1980. So I said, well, it's a nice experience. The salary was good. Position was very interesting for me. I'm an engineer, and then I was being asked to run an office. That was a nice challenge. I was aware that situation would be difficult in China, and I came for the first time in 1980 here to assess a little bit the environment in Beijing, how we could open a rep office and things like that. And by early 1981, I was already stationed in Beijing. I never planned, as a matter of fact, to stay so many years here because it was like, okay, I have a nice job, a nice salary. And I certainly was not planning to spend my life, so to speak, in China. But 1 year was added, 1 other year was added. And then I got so-called stuck in Beijing, is the name of one of my websites. Many people asked me the question with a very suspicious, tone, like, why did you come to China so early? So suspecting I must be some kind of communist or socialist who sought refuge in the only, or one of the only communist countries remaining. So I'm definitely not a communist or a socialist. I'm a capitalist. But so this is the whole start of the story. And okay, that makes now 35 years of experience with China.
So why did you end up staying? Were there other opportunities that came about, or did you just fall in love with the country?
Well, I have quite a balanced view, if I may say this myself, about China. I'm not the guy who will say, I love China, I only eat Chinese food, and, the West is bad and stuff like that. No. I try to have a balanced view, so that makes that I say good things about China, but I'm also not afraid to point out that there are problems in this country. Do I like China? I think, well, in a certain way, yes. This may be sometimes when you love a country, you also point out its problems and you try to solve them. This is something that the Chinese, as a matter of fact, appreciate. Many people don't understand when I say things that are wrong in China. They say, oh, Gilbert, how can you do this? Why don't they kick you out? Well, there is a difference between criticizing to criticize and criticize to improve the situation. You see there's something wrong, and then you tell the Chinese, sorry, for you Chinese, for China, this is really bad. And we could change the situation for the better in this and this and this way. So you come with a constructive criticism and also say, well, I can help you to do it, which I did in several instances. So love for the country, yes. So this is why I try to make the environment better, the society better, companies better. This is the whole part. I like very much Chinese food, but now for my lunch I will go to my favorite Belgian restaurant in Beijing, and I will have my Belgian dishes. So I'm not converted to only Chinese. But also there is another element, I'm not very young anymore, and then people say, oh, Gilbert, what are you going to do when you retire? And I say, well, as a matter of fact, I'm already 2 years retired, and I still hold 6 jobs. And then on the other hand, they say, oh, where will you go when you really, really retire? I said, I don't have an answer for that. I'm from Belgium. I don't see myself going back to my home country. I say, maybe jokingly a little bit, but it's as a matter of fact serious. I would be dead of boredom going back to Belgium after 6 months. What am I going to do in this country? In Belgium, you also have I have my Belgian beer and food in Beijing. I don't miss it. But the life you have in China, if you really join, you jump on the Chinese train and you participate in life here as you should be, life is very intense. It's 24/24, it's 7 days a week. This is a country where things are moving very fast, in a speed that has never been seen in any country around the world. I show this in my seminars, what happened in China in 35 years. It's totally unbelievable. This is where the action is. And if you stay in a place like Beijing, yes, it's polluted. Yes, the traffic is horrible. Yes, the bureaucracy is a mess. But come on, this is also a very international city where you can find all the food you want. Nightlife is great. Culture is great. You meet a lot of interesting people. It's very intense. I'm also involved with the Rotary, so I meet many people, older people, younger people, from all kinds of backgrounds, nationalities. It's really a cool, interesting place. You go to some other country back, and what are you going to do?
There's certainly going to be a little bit less action.
Yes.
All right, well, I want to ask you one question, a bit of clarification on the criticism issue, and then we can get into the speed of change that's taking place in China. So you mentioned that constructive criticism is welcome, but I wonder if you maybe are in a unique position because you've lived and worked in China for so long, you even had roles with the Beijing government, that you're maybe more considered an insider, or at least you're very trusted in the community. Does that give you an advantage levying criticism?
How could I say it? It's a two-way street. There's always a reason for something. I'm most probably one of the very few foreigners who worked on the inside of the Chinese government, especially the Beijing government. I had a very challenging role during the run-up to the Olympics. I had a little bit the name of being a rebel and not listening to my bosses within the Beijing government. And I remember at one point, for example, they wanted to rehire me. It was like, and they asked me so many funny questions. There was there was a panel interrogating me whether I was fit for the job or not. And I told them, I said, well, if you don't hire me anyway, I will do what I want to do, and I will continue to help Beijing develop its economy and stuff like that. It was really hilarious at a certain point. But the reason why they liked me was in another instance. I was asked to write a major study of the economy of Beijing, basically rewriting on my way the 5-year plan for the city, which then I did. It was an enormous study. And then they told me a lot. All the big bureaucrats were sitting there dictating me, Gilbert, you should look at this, and we want you to do that, and this and that, and blah, 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 like for 20 minutes on. And I was sitting there stone-faced to them, not giving any sign. And then they stopped at the end, and they said, oh, I think you're not really listening to us, and you will not do what we asked you to do. And I looked at them and I said, and then they said, actually, this is what we like from you, so please get started and do whatever you want, and we are looking forward to see what you're going to come up with. I mean, that really illustrates very much the funny relation I have. But this relation has been the result of many years of interacting, where they know, yes, I can criticize, but I will also keep things confident, because I've been on the inside, like we call it in Chinese, the neibu, the internal matters, where you're not supposed to be inside, but I was always allowed inside, and they know they can trust me, even if I have so-called a big mouth. I know how far I can go, and if I know these things are, I wouldn't call it state secrets, but they are confidential, then, go over my dead body. I won't talk about it. So they know they can trust me in this way on confidentiality, but also, like I already explained, like the 3-step process. I detect a problem, I explain it, that it is bad. Not for Gilbert, because they don't give a damn about Gilbert being unhappy or foreigners being unhappy. They want to know what's in it for them, what's bad for China, what's bad for the economy, and then you explain what we can do to improve it. And then if they say, well, Gilbert, can you help? Then you roll up your sleeves and get to work. And don't come with big PowerPoints or 60 slides. You just do it, like Nike says, do it, just do it. And I did it, like, the story of the Olympics is totally crazy. Many people don't believe this story unless I tell them, well, you want to watch the CCTV movie they made about me? Wow. 30 minutes movie about the whole story, and then you can see I'm not making this up. But they came to me like 2001, 2002, and the big boss of the Beijing economy came to me and they said, Gilbert, we have a big problem. I said, well, what problem do we have? He said, we have the Olympics in 2008, and we have to build all the stadiums. And we don't have money. Can you find a way to build the stadiums? Can you find a way to get the money and make it, work? Oh, wow. Okay, guys, you have anything else for me to do today? Let's get to work. I mean, it was completely, incredible, because everybody thought around the world, oh, Beijing, no problem. They have tons of money and China will help. Nope. The central government said to Beijing, these are your Olympics and you are going to do it and you have no money from us. Wow. Sort it out. And they had no budget. They had never planned this budget in the city. So they really didn't have money. And the central government, they contributed very heavily with the security, which of course cost a lot of money. You can see how much it cost in Athens, for example. You have an idea. So, of course, security was handled by the central government, but really building all the venues was in the hands of Beijing. And it was like mission impossible. And people told me, Gilbert, you will never get this through because this is not possible. Nobody is going to put money on the table to build sports stadiums. You know, you look around the world, it always failed. But okay, I'm stubborn and I don't give up. So I launched a project as a PPP, public-private partnership, and then made a lot of publicity on behalf of the Beijing government, which was also a very hilarious role because nobody believed him. He said, what? This Belgian guy is working for the Beijing Development and Reform Commission? Come on, you must be joking. So they were calling the government. They were calling the Ministry of Foreign Trade, and they were calling CCPIT or whoever to say, who the hell is that guy? You know. And they confirm, yes, we know Laufal. Yeah, of course, he's doing his job. I said, oh, really? Oh, my God. Hilarious things. And the worst, or I would say the best joke was the American embassy. They called the ministry, and they said, oh, we have this Mr. Gilbert Van Kerckhove who came to see us about the Olympics, or who wants to see us about the Olympics. Can we ask you, does he speak English? It was like a fake question just to double check whether I was genuine or not. And the guys in the Beijing government, they had a lot of fun with it. I was like annoyed, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, guys, I give you so many problems. And then the official said to me, no, Gilbert, we are so happy. You are doing a great job because everybody is calling us up. What the hell is this guy doing? I said, you really act if you don't leave a stone unturned. I mean, this is the stuff, you know, and they called me the Fireman, Beijing Fireman. When something hits the fan, like we say, call Gilbert, you know, he will maybe have a solution. And I always say, why the hell they always come with impossible problems to me? Can they never come to me with some easy stuff? And then they say, it is difficult. I answer, oh my gosh, how can I do this? Yeah, Gilbert, you have 24 hours to solve the problem. I mean, this is what it takes to build confidence and working with the Chinese. Chinese people, okay, despite all the defects they have, deficiencies, whatever you call it, they are very pragmatic. They just want to move ahead. This is also, if you talk about risk prevention and risk analysis and risk insurance, they don't want to hear about that. They said, okay, if something happens, we will deal with it. You know, we don't want to study all the things that can go wrong. If it goes wrong, we will handle it. Because it shocks foreigners. But this is the way the people think. You have to be pragmatic. Don't come with big sermons, you know. Just do it and say, okay, this and this and this you can do. Okay? You want me to help? I can help. So basically, that's the confidence building that you have.
So I've always thought that the reason China was able to develop and move so quickly was predominantly because of their governmental system. But it sounds like you're also saying that it's something just in the psyche, in their mentality about the way to address problems.
Yes. Well, I'm the first one to say that, yes, the Chinese system is not perfect. It has we have a zillion problems. I fully agree. But let's look a little bit at the positive side of it all. Which country in the world still has effective 5-year plans? I mean, you look at the U.S., you look at Europe. What plans do we have? We navigate from one day to the other in a merely chaotic way. Here we have a lot of dinosaurs. Okay, I agree. They sit in the National Development and Reform Commission, in other think tanks. But there is a lot of people who sit in there who are real technocrats and who really understand what you're talking about. And they really work very hard on preparing their 5-year plans, trying to look into the future, how this country should change, where it should go to, and how we can reach a certain goal. Again, it's not done perfectly, you can criticize us a lot, but at least they have a vision. At least they try to put something in place. And like I mentioned, I was asked to write my own 5-year plan for the Beijing government. That ended up to be also very hilarious with one situation, because when I published, I gave my report to the Beijing government, refusing to listen to their instruction. And then their 5-year plan also came out. Guess what? All the bullet points, nearly 90% of the bullet points in my paper were the same as the one in the Beijing official 5-year plan. And one newspaper came to me and said, "Oh, Gilbert, we have to congratulate you because Beijing has strictly followed your 5-year plan." I said, no, not at all. This is not the case. Don't kill me, okay? But the explanation here is, I looked at it with a foreign view, trying to look at it as an engineering view, pragmatic view. And all the problems I identified, the Chinese side had also identified. So we don't always have to tell the Chinese, "Listen to me, I'm going to tell you how you should do your job." They don't need this really, because very often they know where things go wrong. And when I wrote my book, I mentioned also about the 12th 5-year plan, and for example, on the environmental issues, that despite the fact in the world everybody was criticizing China, oh my God, the pollution, the environmental issues are so bad, they have to do something. We should tell them they have a problem. You didn't have to tell them they had a problem. They knew it. And already in the 12th 5-year plan, there was an enormous amount of budgets and projects listed to try to tackle the pollution issues in China. Okay, it was maybe too modest. It was not always 100% correct. Since then, with the new 5-year plan, they have intensified their plans to improve it, despite all the counter-currents and difficulties they have, but they basically know about it. So the whole system in China very often is misunderstood by the foreigners. They say, well, it's sclerotic, it's a dinosaur type. No, you also have to respect all the technocrats who really try to do a good job. Like in my book, I mentioned all the studies that were done about the environment. They are excellent. For example, in climate change, the Chinese government came to the conclusion, yes, there is climate change, yes, there is warming of the planet, and these are the following aspects are going to be a big problem for our country, and how can we solve them? Very clack, very pragmatic, straight to the point, and things like that. So the 5-year plans are very strong, but they also give a guidance to the country where to go. And this explains why in 35, 40 years, this country has come from a medieval situation, let's be honest, to something, like an international level. You walk around in Beijing, you see how this country is. Can you imagine how this country was 35 years ago when I came here? It's impossible to compare. So they have fixed a real goal, a target. I'll give you one example. Many foreigners have been complaining, oh, China is making highways to nowhere, they pump money into infrastructure, building all these high-speed rails that nobody uses, has no purpose, blah, 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 blah. Okay, this is a very, very wrong. I don't say some lines should not have been built. This is another matter. But let's say 80%, just to say a word. They really serve the purpose. What has been the consequence of this pumping money into investment is that 10 years ago, the whole industry was on the coastal areas. We had Shanghai and Guangzhou, basically the big industrial centers where everything was being done. Nobody with a normal mind would have invested in the center or the west of China because simply shipping costs from that region to, for example, you would ship a container, let's say, from Sichuan to Shanghai. It was more expensive than shipping it from Shanghai to the U.S., and you have all kinds of problems. So who the hell would invest in central China? So all the migrants, the 200, 300 migrants, they have to move from the inland to the coastal areas because this is the only place where they could find a decent job. So how China solved it is simply because now they opened the whole center and west of China with their highways. You just travel around like I did. I went to Chongqing, I went to Xinjiang and all these places, and then, wow, you're impressed. And then suddenly Foxconn, who makes all the Apple stuff, starts having problems with its factories in Guangdong province. Those guys, they don't employ 10,000 people. It's like 10 times, 20 times more. So they couldn't get the people. They were the first to move to places like Zhengzhou, to Sichuan province, to set up factories of hundreds of people, 100,000 of people working in their factories. That would have been impossible 10 years ago because of the failing logistics. So this is what people don't understand, that sometimes China is more clever than other countries by pumping money in this, opening central and western areas, reducing the flow of migrants, developing second-tier, third-tier, fourth-tier cities. And you see what's going on today in China. You go to these third-tier cities like I did in November last year in the Chongqing Yangtze River area. I came there and I thought, poor Sichuan stuff, Chongqing, okay, that's still Sichuan for me. And then you go there, you expect to find poor villages. Wow, the buildings, the traffic, the cars, they were more nice than in Beijing. And I said to the people, the Chinese people, where is all this money coming from? They said, well, we have opened all the communication. Now we can go where we want, from where we want. We have all these tunnels, these highways, these speed trains. It's all opening up. Industry can now work here, which was not possible. So, these are some of the things. Yes, it's an authoritarian capitalist system, as I call it here in China, but at least there is a guidance, even being imperfect. Today it's facing tremendous challenges. But what do you want? Bringing 1.4 billion people out of poverty in 35 years. No, it's not an easy job, right?
That's really interesting. So you've touched upon a couple of key issues I wanted to discuss in this interview, one being the Great Migration and the other one being the environmental issues. When China is putting forth these 5-year plans, how are they rating these issues? What are the most important issues to them, including these and any other issues that might be on the table? And then do you see a difference? Is your opinion different than that of the Chinese government as to what is most important to move China forward?
Basically, in the 5-year plans, their vision is more or less correct. You can argue about it, that it's not enough. The vision is there. The problem in China is always the implementation. The other problem they have is, like I say, it's such a complex mountain of challenges they are facing. If you try to solve one problem, you also have to tackle all the others because they are interlinked. This is a very big issue. So what is the main issue in China is that they have to tackle so many problems at the same time. They are between two hard rocks. I give one example of the very big hard rock situation they have. There is tremendous overcapacity in the industry, like, for example, iron and steel, aluminum, floating glass, cement. These are some of the major overcapacities. The Northeast, Rust Belt, they have too many factories. They should be closed. Yes, President Xi Jinping, he agrees that the zombie factories and all this reform has to be tackled. But what are you going to do with the 500,000 people that suddenly, one day to the other, do not have a job? There is where the problem is. So social instability is a huge concern for the Chinese government. It makes them a little bit paranoid today because they always are worried that trouble is going to come into the streets. But if you want to reform the industry, reduce overcapacity, you want to take out depolluting factories that harm the environment, it's going to take a lot of efforts because it's going to bring a whole series of chain reactions within the local governments. The local governments, unfortunately, often have been helping polluting industries because they receive, a red envelope under the table to shut up their mouths and let them pollute. And on the other hand, the factories still pay tax dollars. They have employment for the local people. Now, if the central government says this factory has to be closed because it's polluting, it's outdated, and blah, 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 Local governments are not so very happy about that, because you reduce their personal income, their official income, they have social instability in their region. They don't know what to do with the workers. Now that the real estate is also going down, one of their other income they had was the sale of land to real estate companies. This is also now drying up. So the local governments, they are squeezed like hell because where can they take their tax income from? So you can dream about improving the whole situation, but you cannot do it overnight, like closing all these polluting factories, but also overcapacity. So the issues we have with the migrants is really very complicated. You look at the situation in Beijing. Beijing has a very particular situation, both for migrants and for foreigners. I remember before I was very active in the European Chamber, and like more than 1 year ago, roughly, the European Chamber contacted me and they said, Gilbert, we are really a little bit worried. The Beijing government seems not to back up anymore the satellite cities around Beijing in terms of developing industry and stuff like that. And then I told the chamber, I said, well, I think you're not aware of what's going on in Beijing. First of all, the Beijing government does not want anymore to develop any of the satellite cities around Beijing in terms of industry. And secondly, they don't want to have so many people here. If you have industry, you need workers, and they don't want the people to come anymore to Beijing. They want to reduce the population because the pollution levels are so high. If they do not stop the growth of the population, they do not stop the industry, they will never be able to tackle the environmental issues and also transportation issues. You don't get it. People are not welcome anymore in Beijing. I had just said this to the chamber, like 1 or 2 weeks later, the mayor of Beijing officially announced that they would put a ceiling at the population of Beijing and would try to reduce the population in the next coming 5 or 10 years, or at least limit the inflow. So what they have done, basically, in Beijing is make life very difficult for the migrants. They refuse to give them hukou. They refuse to give school for their kids. They have increased the subway line prices. So if you get a salary of 3,000 RMB per month and suddenly your expenses of riding the subway shoot up to 400 RMB, that's a lot of money, Rentals completely through the roof. The migrants cannot find any place anymore to live in a decent way. So life has become very difficult for those people. They cannot buy a house. Basically, it's impossible for them to buy a house because they will never get the papers in order. So they're kicking out the industry. They're kicking out the migrants. So the migrants is a big problem. There is a lot. I do not agree with many of the Beijing people who look down on the migrants. They say, we don't want these people here, they are a nuisance and blah, blah. I said, well, you complain about the migrants, but if you go to the restaurant, who you think is going to serve you? Because all the service people today in Beijing are from the outside, because the Beijing people do not want to do such a low-level job. They are too nice for that. So today, already in Beijing, we have this unsustainable situation of sky-high rents for commercial, for residential, problems to find service people. It's becoming really a very, very difficult situation. So Beijing is a little bit an exception. They have been starting to look into finishing this, I would say, caste system in China, where you have the people divided in an urban hukou or a rural hukou, which I think really is, considering a lot of the population in China as being second-class citizens. Many voices have been coming up. I think more should be done at that level because the problems related to the migrant population are totally huge and can have a devastating impact on the future of this country. And because you see, still we have like 250 million migrants. Socially and family-wise, this is an unsustainable situation. Now, they are opening up second-tier city, third-tier cities, where they make it more easy for the rural people to get the hukou. The problem we have is, what I see, for example, the major problem is the family situation, the left behind children. Now the government is starting to look more and more seriously into this matter. Families are divided. Wife and husband live in different cities. Their kids live with the grandparents. This is unsustainable. We have huge problems on that level with the left behind kids who have no real education. They are lost. They have the grandparents are not able to give them the right education and guidance in their lives. So we have a lot of juvenile crime and drugs and all these things coming up. This just in the past couple of months, the government has started to seriously look into this issue. But I think this is something they have to solve a problem with rural and also the urban hukou situation. In my book, I mention also they are starting to try to regularize ownership of land in the countryside. This is another big issue where the farmers now are less and less willing to give up their land because they know, well, maybe they still have a rural hukou, but at least they have the land they can, use to do something. And once they lost it, it's gone forever. So ownership of land is still very murky simply because the bureaucracy has not been able to really put into place an organized system to define which land belongs to whom. So they have started to do satellite measurements and starting to map the land, which is very, very fractioned. But a lot needs to be done there to also eliminate all the bad situations in the countryside where local governments have been robbing the farmers of their land. And we have seen many, many riots more and more in the countryside that the peasants don't take it anymore, that their land is being taken away for a couple of renminbi, and then the local governments, they make tons of money out of it. These things are more and more unacceptable for the people. So this is where, again, the central government has a huge task to impose the law and order everywhere in the country. And the local authorities, again, they are not always willing to follow and obey the instructions. It's the same for the environment. The Chinese government is aware that the environment situation is bloody bad. In my book, I write about that, and it's really bad. What people have not been grasping yet is that if we are shocked by the air pollution in cities like Beijing and many other provinces, Henan, for example, being very bad also. Not only Hebei, but Henan is one of the worst now. And how can you tackle all these environmental issues? It's very, very difficult. It's easy to say. But if you look at the air pollution, yes, we can see it because, damn it, today I cannot even see the buildings. But what you don't notice, the worst, is the water situation. China is a country where the water availability per person, as I also talk about in my book, is below the world average and the minimum required. So China, being an enormous country, doesn't have enough agricultural land, doesn't have enough water, and the water they have is heavily polluted. So this is now becoming more and more into the open. People realize there's something wrong with the water. How can we solve this problem? Because water is, of course, important. We drink it, but it goes onto the fields in agriculture. And the vegetables we are eating, they contain, heavy metals, pesticides, and so on and so on. I'm very happy today we see more and more people being aware of those dangers. But this is where the task of the government is really to impose their regulations top down.
Okay, so you've brought up so many interesting points for me. I don't know how we'll have time to get to all of them, but one that I really want to touch upon quickly is I was always under the assumption that this problems that the immigrants were facing in areas like Beijing was due to mismanagement. But it sounds like you're saying that they're intentionally creating the life to be harder for the immigrants so that
Yeah.
they are
Yes.
enticing them to go elsewhere. But it also seems, though, that people are still moving to Beijing in mass because that's where the opportunities lie. And now they're putting forth this Jingjiji proposal, which is anticipating massive numbers of immigrants still moving to that region. I'm curious, how do you feel about that proposal as a whole? And is there anything more that can be done to really curb the migration problem and to give people opportunities in other cities?
I think the only way around is to really develop more the second tier and third tier cities. This is the only way because they will continue to block. This is very clear. When I talked with Chinese people in Beijing who know the government very well, they told me flatly, they said, Gilbert, are you stupid? Didn't you understand it? We want those people out. Simple. This is the stance of the government. But of course, where can they go? One of the, I think, one of also of the zillion critical issues we have is, for example, healthcare and education. As long as the government cannot improve this situation in second tier, third tier cities and others, improving hospital care, improving education, still the people will push to come to the big cities where they have decent health care. You see the big problem we have with the hospitals, for example, in Beijing. I know many of my Chinese friends, their parents come from their village, they come to Beijing to go to the hospital because in their province they can't find the same treatment. So again, the government is aware of that. But in the health sector, we have enormous problems. They can also not be solved overnight as long as they don't build better hospitals in those other cities, better education. The people will still try to see where they can go to get it, so they come to the larger cities. There is a trend, however, that we see more and more of the second tier, third tier cities developing that we did not see 10 years ago. For example, of course, there was this communication issue, a logistics issue. This is slowly improving, but I think now communication being solved, the big issue is education and medical sector. You see, Beijing is the city that has most universities of whole China, research institutes and stuff like that. There's a too high concentration of this here. As long as they cannot delocalize a little bit and put them everywhere around the country, then people are going still to flock here. But then they must make the conditions better for those people, like universities, to be based somewhere else. People say, yes, okay, as a professor, as a teacher, I agree to live in that city because environment is good, conditions are reasonable, healthcare is good, education for my kids is reasonable. This is a problem that I think merits a lot of attention, but it's also an impossible situation to solve. If you remember, just some weeks ago, there was this viral video in the media here in China about this lady who was queuing up in the hospital to get a ticket to see a doctor. And she was desperate because after 2-3 days of queuing up, she never got a ticket because the ticket scalpers were working there. And let's say the ticket was 50 renminbi. Oh, yes, she could buy one if she paid like 2,000, 3,000 or 5,000 renminbi to the ticket scalpers to have the ticket. Why is this happening? Is because, first of all, everybody comes to Beijing. As I said, the best hospitals are still here. And secondly, the big issue is also, why does all this scalping exist? Why did we have all these issues with, selling expensive medicine by doctors who then got the kickback from the pharmaceutical companies? Can you blame those nurses? Can you blame those doctors? I would say we can't. Because if a surgeon who works day and night to save the lives of people, if a surgeon gets a salary of 4,000 renminbi per month or something like that, is this fair? And other people who works in financial, they have salaries of 50,000 or 100,000 renminbi per month. There's something wrong in this story. Now, how can these people survive? Okay, they try their way, they sell medicine, get kickbacks, they get red envelopes. Who the hell today wants to be a nurse? There are so many nurses lacking in China. Healthcare for the seniors, a huge problem, aging population. We cannot get nurses. Why? Because they are underpaid. Who the hell wants to work under those conditions? So the government has to change the salary levels. But how can they do this? Where is the money going to come from? They have to they have to build new hospitals. They have to increase the salaries of the doctor. While the whole medical system, retirement system is still totally, unable to cope with the situation in China. 30 years ago, we had the iron rice bowl system. Before you were born, the government was taking care of you until you were dead. But this has completely collapsed. Now they have to rebuild the social security system, and they are still far from it. So all this is contributing that people spend less money because they are afraid like hell they're going to have a health problem. They have to go and pay it all themselves, because you go to a hospital, if you don't have money to deposit or you don't have a credit card, you can go out again. They won't take you, however sick you are. So this is a big concern, but where is the money going to come from? So, of course, the Chinese government would have to raise taxes. Somehow they need more tax income. This is another big issue. It's nice to say you have to do this, you have to do that, but who is going to pay for it? So this whole system with the migrants and I would say diminuing the wealth gap in rural areas, this is a huge challenge for the government. It will take years, in my opinion, to improve it. I think they are aware, and they are trying to relax now, for example, the hukou issue, except in cities like Beijing, obviously.
What's that word that you just said? Hukou?
Hukou, yeah, the hukou. I'm sorry, I'm using this word because it's like untranslatable, if I may say so. The hukou is the most important paper that the Chinese can have. It's the registration with the government that defines you either as a rural person or a city person. Wow. So if you are born, let's say, in Zhengzhou, Henan, then you will have a Zhengzhou hukou. You're registered in that city. Whatever happens in your life, you always have to go back there. And if you want to marry, you need to get your papers from that registration office where you were born. Can be in a village, which is, of course, a very bad situation for everybody. You have to go to that small little city to get your papers. You want to marry, you want to do whatever you want. You are for life defined by the place you were born. And to get a transfer of a hukou or the registration is extremely difficult. Many, like in Beijing, is extremely difficult to get, for example, the Beijing registration or the Beijing hukou. If you don't have a Beijing hukou, you cannot buy real estate now in Beijing. Except you can submit tons of documents of taxes and stuff like that nobody has, because nobody is working with a contract. Nobody pays taxes. Service people in the industry, they never get a contract. Their bosses never pay Social Security for them. So, of course, they have no papers to prove the government, look, I pay taxes 3 years. They live already 20 years in Beijing and never paid a cent. Mm-hmm. It's not the problem of the migrants. It's the system that sucks. You work for a foreign restaurant, yes, can be sure that every penny will be paid in Social Security, because foreigners are being looked at, whatever they do, and you have to obey the law. But, foreign restaurant pays everything. Next door, the Chinese restaurant, he doesn't pay a dime. So it's really like you're a second-class citizen if you are coming from another province with another hukou. So, for example, if a family, let's say they come from Sichuan, from a village in Sichuan, and the parents are working here, they want their kid to study here, it's very difficult. They cannot get access to public schools. They are going to be refused. Even if they succeed to put their kid in school, even they do their full schooling here in Beijing, if they want to do the university exam, the infamous Gaokao, they have to go back to their village to do it. They cannot pass the exam in Beijing. It's a tremendous problem for everybody. Yeah. So the hukou reform has been discussed a couple of times already by the party congresses, but they are making slow improvement. What is lacking in China is a unified registration system like we have in all countries, like in Belgium. Okay, you move from one city to another, your file is transferred to that new city. You re-registered in the other city, and all your documents and everything are being, moved. But in China, this doesn't exist. Your ID card, your everything is done by the place you're coming from. If you're working in Beijing and your ID card is issued somewhere in Sichuan in a village, so to speak, if you lose it in Beijing, you have to find a way to go back to your home city and get your ID card, which is like unsolvable problem, really, because you cannot even travel back from Beijing to your original city, because you cannot board a bus or a plane or whatever without an ID card. So we have like tons of problems that all the poor Chinese people face because of this hukou problem. This national registration of the people, which would then also official registration not only of your ID but also your marriage. Now people can marry in several locations because one city doesn't communicate with the other. So people sometimes find out that people are married 2 or 3 times. and I mean, it's really very complicated. And I think they have the idea at one point to make a national database of identity, so then, people could transfer from one city to the other. Today they don't want this, but it should happen one day. And the same is, for example, another very controversial national database. The government says, yes, they will do it, is the national database on property. Basically, the government wants to build a national database of all the ownership of real estate. Many people are against it because they don't want the government to know that they have 30 apartments everywhere around the country. Then the government would say, where is the money coming from? It explains also the crazy situation we have with real estate in a place like Beijing, where people, they just buy apartments as an investment and then they lock them up and they don't put them on the market. Explains also the high incidence of rents in Beijing. But so the government has to introduce all these new things like database for real estate, database for the ID, but vested interests are not always very happy with that. They have been trying to enforce this real estate database, but they bump into reluctance of local governments who are not eager, to lay bare the ownership of their apartments.
Okay. This has been a really interesting conversation, Gilbert. I thank you for coming on. We have about just maybe 10 minutes left, and I have 2 questions I really want to ask. One for my organization's purpose, and then one so that we can talk about your forthcoming book. Our purpose with our organization, we're founded by a Chinese man who was a lifetime architect, and he collaborated with 30 or so other experts to put forth a proposal for a vertical city, a 3-dimensional city which limits the use of vehicles, and there's many benefits to sustainability and ease of life. So my question to you is, given everything that we've discussed, what are the key takeaways we should consider when trying to pitch this idea to governments, to local jurisdictions, or to the national government to build the first vertical city in China?
You might not know this, but I've been involved pretty heavily in architecture issues. And this was due to my work I was doing with the Olympics and, looking at all these architect issues we had with many, many venues. I even held seminars about architecture in Macau and in Florida about this. So I know a little bit about architecture. I'm not a specialist, but I love it because I think it's a combination of art and design and engineering. I'm an engineer. I've had a lot of discussions with big architect firms about the issues of green buildings, sustainable buildings, and things like that. I think the idea of vertical cities is very good. If we look at the typical American approach, I have an American daughter, and she lives in Carmel, near Indianapolis. And this is the antipode of vertical cities, where you have these enormous amounts of nice big houses spread kilometers and kilometers and kilometers, where everybody has to use car to buy a bread or whatever because everything is so far. It looks very nice. I don't like it. I think a vertical city, at least in many instances, is a solution for a host of problems. It can reduce very much the environmental impact because you avoid traffic. Of course, that would assume that you build a good infrastructure. Yesterday, myself, I was running the subway very far from where I live. I live in Worker Stadium, and I had to go for a meeting in Wudalco, which is pretty far. So I took the subway so far, and I'm really enthusiastic about what Beijing has been doing to build like crazy subway, and they are unstoppable. This is of course, conditio sine qua non. Also, when you have a vertical city, you cannot have one buildings. They are spread all over a certain area, so you need communication between the buildings. You want to avoid people taking a car. Hong Kong is, as a matter of fact, is not a bad example. Of course, it's not always that green, but I lived in Hong Kong for some time, and you could go around in this high-rise city, hopping into the subway and going everywhere. And I never had a car in Hong Kong. I didn't need a car. Beijing is going slowly towards a vertical city. The CBD, Central Business District, is growing at a rate that I simply don't understand what they are doing, because it's a monstrous investment they are doing. We have the World Trade Center there, Kerry Hotel, but across the Third Ring Road, they are building an enormous city. I'm making pictures of that. This is, you can say, really a very, very vertical city. So what they are doing there, of course, they are increasing the subway lines. They have been saying they will also build communication between the vertical buildings, being either by underground tunnels or whatever, aerial tunnels, linking the buildings, like you have a lot in Hong Kong. The big issue today we have with all these vertical cities and the sustainability stuff is I tell the architects, I said, great, guys, you have fantastic ideas with your buildings, and you can make them green. You can save a lot of money on air conditioning by doing very sophisticated venting systems in the building, building air chimneys to recirculate air, blah, blah, blah. You have so many fantastic technologies today that can make a vertical city very green. The big problem we have today in China, that it's very nice on paper when the architects draw it, and then when it goes to the next stage, the execution, the quality we have in the building industry is, I must say, extremely, extremely poor. I come from a civil construction background. My father had a construction company, and I've always been fascinated because of this by building issues, but also architect issues. And then I see, how bad construction is. In my book, I talk about that, about the enormous waste we have in construction, because construction quality is so bad that after 2-3 years you have to rip down everything and do it again. And it's again badly done, so you have to redo it again. You look at Beijing, you look at the quality of windows, you look at the quality of the finishing everywhere, of the bathrooms, of all the equipment. It's awful. It's awful. So you cannot have a green building if the quality is bad. Why the quality is bad? Because when you go to the implementation phase, the builder is going to say, well, do we really need this electronic control from Siemens? We have a cheaper one or whatever. Those bathrooms, I know a guy, he sells his bathroom much cheaper, whatever. Of course, the faucets and everything, the piping is going to break down after 2 years. So this is the big problem. And the third problem is then when already the building company has cut down the nice ideas of the concept, And then it goes to phase 3, the execution, where, sorry to say, you hire a monkey who just fell out of a tree and you tell him, build a building, Can you blame those poor migrants that they have no clue even how to use a hammer? I have seen this myself, and I tell them, hey, wait, guy, I show you how to attack a building wall, okay? You don't use my screwdriver with a stone to hit the wall. I give you a hammer and a chisel, and this is how you have to work.
Wow.
Can you blame the poor guy that he's totally stupid? No, you can't. Because first of all, he's badly paid. Very often they are not even paid at all. There are arrears in salaries of several months. They work under difficult conditions. They never receive training because nobody values artisans. This is a big, big problem. I'm trying to get an electrician for my apartment where I'm now sitting talking to you. I haven't found one in 1.5 years who can come and solve a wiring problem in my home, because the big problem we have in this society that the Chinese, they might go drive a Rolls Royce. I'm not making this up. They drive a Rolls Royce, and then the worker comes to his house to do a job. What? You want 300 renminbi? Oh, you must be crazy. I'll pay you 150 renminbi. The people do not value the artisanship, the workmanship of all the people who work in the building. And, we have electricians, we have carpenters, we have et cetera, et cetera. There are not enough schools that deal with training those people. And then if they have done the training and they go work for a company, construction companies, they just say, what? You think we're going to pay you that much salary? You must be crazy, They don't value the people. They don't give them the tools. So the result is all these nice designs. I go to these seminars and then people talk about green cities and this and that and this and that. And I say, this is a load of nonsense, people. Do you have workers to do this? Are you really going to, follow the specifications done by this clever architect and engineering company? I think this is the biggest challenge we face today in China. I know people in the building industry. I'll give you one example. The doors. You have a vertical city. What people do not understand when you have a vertical city, this is also a vertical chimney. So how you make the glass doors at your lobby to go in, this is a major undertaking. It's like going into a submarine. You better be careful what you do, because the pressure you have on these doors and on the elevator doors is a tremendous. So you need to build the right glass doors to make access to those buildings. You cannot have one layer. You need at least, 2 or 3 layers before you come to the elevators, because of the pressure. So, of course, the Chinese say, this foreign company, they have nice doors, but they're so expensive. I take this other company. And of course, the first wind that blows a little bit too hard blows out those doors, or block them, and then it's a big mess. And then they have to call my friend who runs one of those companies, by the way. He made the doors for the Great Hall of the People, by the way. And then I have to call them and say, oh my gosh, we are stuck. Everything is bad. And then this, you see, this is one little small example that you have, that you make a vertical city, but you neglect, for example, the system with the glass doors, and then, of course, you're out of luck. And then if you do a curtain glass wall, my friend, and then you skip also on the quality of the glass curtain walls, then I would say please go to Shanghai and have a look what's going on with some of the high-rises there, where suddenly a pane of glass is falling down after a couple of years because, the quality was not well done. So if you have a curtain glass wall, it's not well done. You have an enormous waste of energy because you have leakages everywhere from the hot and the cold. I mean, you have companies who can detect it with infrared. They can look at the building. Where are the leakages? We have. But what is China doing on this level? Never mind, Gilbert, too complicated. It costs too much money. So if we want to build vertical cities. I think it's a great idea, but first we have to change the industry, improve the industry in terms of quality, durability. And this cannot be done by cutting corners by the builders and not having the right artisans to work. There are a couple of buildings, you can find in Beijing with good quality. I have a sharp eye for that. I go into a bathroom, I go into a building, I immediately see, they have been cutting corners here. You see cracks here, you see cracks there. You go to the bathroom in your five-star hotel, you just look a little bit under the sink. And then you see, this funny plastic tube there dangling under, And then, of course, everything goes wrong. It's leaking here, it's leaking there. You go to a decent bathroom. In Belgium, we have a bathroom. We buy a bathroom. 15 years later, the bathroom is still there. We don't have to change all the stuff. In my apartment here, every 2 years, I have to change my shower stuff because it's all disintegrating into rust. And it's written American. Yeah, of course, it's all fake. My wife said, this is the best I can find on the market. I said, well, you have a bad eye then. Because, this is the big problem that I see. And because, like I write in my book, it's also really giving a lot of waste that you see. Where I live, in my book, I've been documenting people rip down all the apartments every couple of years. You see trucks of rubble going out, The windows have been redone. 4 or 5 years later, they put again new windows. What the hell is going on? In Europe, we have windows. We put them once, and they are there for 30 years, We're not going to change the window frames after 5 years. Here, this is normal. So if you want to have high-rise buildings, this is something we have to consider. But also one big problem we have, of course, you have to see the whole real estate market. Like I said, we need to have this national registry. In Beijing, we have so many office buildings. And then if you talk to the real estate companies, they say, how is the occupancy rate? They say, my gosh, Gilbert, it's great. 95% occupancy rate. We cannot find places to rent out, so the rents are going up. And then I go around in places like Soho and whatever, many other, and you see all these empty spaces. Because what happens is, all these people, they buy commercial space, apartments. They buy it as an investment. They want to rent it out? Of course not. They just lock the door and they wait until the market goes up, and after a couple of years, they will resell their apartment or their commercial space. So many of the built space, as a matter of fact, is not on the market. So if the government does not solve this, it will drive also the prices up, as it is the case today in Beijing. And then how can people survive financially in those commercial centers or ever if your rents are going sky high? I've been documenting this recently in Beijing. This place, that place, another place, they're all closing down because they simply cannot cope with the rent. It's totally unsustainable. If you want a vertical city, you also have to make sure, of course, maintenance is very important. This is another issue. Maintenance is something that lacks in most buildings. The Singapore people, they have been very good at that. They have been leading the way in Beijing and in other places of showing that, they know how to manage commercial space and apartments by not selling the units, but they manage everything themselves, and they also maintain high quality. This is why they have been very successful. But this is a new trend that has to come into the market. But if we have, like in CBD in Beijing, the sky-high prices, then you walk around third, fourth floor somewhere in the building and suddenly you see, oops, they're all empty.
Wow.
This doesn't work. So these are also problems if you want to maintain a good standard and a working vertical city. There are several aspects to be successful. I think a place like Singapore, most probably, they have been pretty successful to do this.
Well, Gilbert, thank you so much. Those are some really key insights you've given us. I still want to give you the opportunity to talk about your forthcoming book or enlighten us on anything that you feel is important.
Well, I have a lack of time. I'm firing up again all my different websites because I love to write stuff, and is also to a little bit reestablish my name in this. But my big target is to restart writing. I had my first book, Toxic Capitalism, where I give a glimpse of one of the next books coming, which is a new view on society, a society that would respect quality, durability, environment, but also respect to human beings, giving them a fair salary. I don't want to talk too much about that, but it's a thing that zips into my head, and I have to start writing about that. And then you are all allowed to laugh now, because I will also publish a book about jokes that I have collected. That will be most probably my first book, because it's basically sitting in my computer. And then at one stage, I also want to write a book, not really like a biography, but people tell me, Gilbert, you have so many funny stories or interesting stories, why don't you write them down? And it would be like, some stories of my professional life, starting in Brazil, China, but even in a country like Vietnam, just telling stories to illustrate, what happened in your professional life, what I did right, what did I do wrong, because certainly I did many things wrong. You cannot consider yourself a hero. You have to be modest and realize sometimes that, you could have done things better, most probably. So it would be more personal book, a third book. I have some other ideas in my head, but that's the future.
Great. So for our listeners, we'll post links to Gilbert's bio and his book, Toxic Capitalism. You can find those by visiting our website, which is verticalcity.org/podcast. Gilbert, thank you so much. I really appreciated this interview. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again in the future, and we'll be in touch soon.
Oh, thanks for your time, Lennon, and good success with your project.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Vertical City. Learn more about the Vertical City concept and continue the conversation by visiting our website, verticalcity.org. I truly hope that you have enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe to our podcast, leave a review on iTunes, and most importantly, share Vertical City with your friends and colleagues so that together we can create solutions for sustainable living. I'm Lennon Richardson, signing off for the Vertical City team. See you next time.